In my previous video, I talked about my top 5 best drivers of 2023, and now it's time to talk about my top 5 worst drivers of 2023. Now, if you have not seen that video, then do go and check it out. I will have a link to it in the description, and also don't forget to let me know your top 5 worst drivers in the comments box below as well. Also, if I do sound a little bit different, it's because I'm kind of feeling a little bit under the weather. I've got a bit of a sore throat, like a power unit going towards the end of the season. I'm coming towards the end of my life cycle, but don't worry, for next season I will have a fresh one. But anyway, let's get into it. Coming in at number 5, I have got Sergio Perez, the driver who eventually secured second in the championship, also giving Red Bull their first kind of 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship as well. And that was pretty significant because out of all of the history that Red Bull have made, I mean, you know, winning 9 in a row with Seb, winning 4 titles on the bounce with Seb, and then winning 10 with Max, and, you know, him winning his 3rd title. They've won all of these things, but they never had a 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, even during kind of the Vettel-Weber era. So, you know, Checo did help them achieve that, but you know, apart from that and kind of the 2 wins, which were quite good to see at the beginning of the season in Jeddah and Baku, it's been a poor season by Sergio Perez. And ultimately, you know, don't get me wrong, whilst I think the majority of the blame for this being a non-competitive championship, whilst the majority of it has to go to Ferrari and Mercedes for not giving their drivers good enough cars, Sergio Perez also has to take a massive amount of kind of that blame as well for the fact that we didn't really get even a tiny title fight. You know, at the beginning of the season when he won again in Saudi and Baku, especially after Baku where he won back-to-back, you know, the sprint and then also the race. Whilst I don't think anyone in the world honestly thought that Checo was going to win the championship, it kind of made it look for a second like maybe it might just be a little bit interesting. He might push Max a little bit more, maybe, you know, win 3, 4, maybe 5 races this season with how dominant that car looked. But the moment he had that kind of almost pressure on his shoulders of being the outsider that could maybe push Max after Baku, he crumbled straight away. Monaco Q1 crashing out immediately after having such a good race last time out, and I think that's where his kind of spiral really started. So yeah, it's not been a great season by Sergio Perez. He's clearly not, you know, I think most of it has been pressure. I don't think it's, you know, been purely the car. I think also Christian Horner has also talked about that, and the fact that, you know, when he started getting knocked out of Q2 in a couple of the races, you know, I think mentally that just got him into a downward spiral, and he did recover eventually to, you know, kind of save his season. But again, I mean, I talked about it in my previous video. The fact that there was a genuine conversation in the last kind of 4 or 5 races that, you know, Lewis potentially could finish ahead of Checo in the championship, it should never have been that close. It should have been, you know, done and dusted a long time before, you know, before Vegas. And when you look at, you know, what he's contributed to Red Bull, you know, only scored 33.1% of the team's points. Obviously, we know that Max single-handedly could have won the Constructors' title for Red Bull. Obviously, he was thoroughly dominated by Max over the course of the season, and the only kind of 2 times that he outraced him and outqualified him, there was a bit of reliability, you know, for Max to do with that. So yeah, he has been thoroughly kind of dominated by Max, and I think, you know, it's been a tough season by Checo, but I think what it boils down to for me is, number 1, qualifying is where he really went wrong, but he's never been a great qualifier. Usually he always makes up for it in the races, but this season his racecraft has just, you know, gone out the window. He was having collisions left, right and center, making mistakes that, I mean, we usually don't see Checo do that. He's usually such a good Sunday driver, really good in the races, really good at kind of managing his tires, keeping it clean, and just working through the field and, you know, getting better compared to where he qualified. But this season, you know, even in the final race, collisions with Lando and, you know, a few other collisions as well, like in Qatar, having kind of those collisions. So yeah, it's been a strange season by Checo, really out of character in my opinion, because again, whilst he's never been kind of the best qualifier, it seems like he's lost the thing that's kind of that's been his bread and butter in Formula 1, the race performances on the Sunday. That is what he's lost in 2023, and unfortunately, you know, that's what has led, I think, to Max being so dominant. He was always going to be ahead of Checo, but I think this season has been so disappointing, and that is why, you know, these rumors kind of came about during the mid-portion of the season. That is why Ricciardo is back at AlphaTauri, because I don't think they trust Checo to be in that Red Bull for the next, you know, 2 or 3 years. And next up, in 4th place, I have got Kevin Magnuson. Now, K-Mag has had a really disappointing season, I think, because off the back of last year, where I think there was a lot of positivity about K-Mag kind of, returning to the sport kind of last minute as well, jumping in for Bahrain, scoring those points and kind of leading the team through a difficult period, especially, with the whole Mick Schumacher situation. I think this season has been really, really disappointing by him. And although he did get that contract extension for next season, I genuinely think that he can't afford to have another 2023 in 2024, because otherwise he's probably going to be out of the team. Now, granted, both Hülkenberg and Magnuson have not enjoyed driving this car. I think the bedrock of Magnuson's struggles this season, and he's talked about it really eloquently actually with the race. I remember earlier in the year, is that as the car was developed, it seemed to get away from his driving style, away from his comfort zone, a lot more towards Nico Hülkenberg. But at the same time, they weren't making that progress. There was this big upgrade that they were hoping for in Austin, and it didn't quite deliver. In the end, they did finish last in the championship. But I think the reason why K-Mag is on this list is because, with Nico Hülkenberg coming into the team, kind of returning to Formula One, a brand new team for him, I think most people, before the season began, expected K-Mag to have that advantage over Hulk. And yet, even though Hülkenberg didn't, dominate K-Mag, especially in qualifying in terms of raw pace, it was not, K-Mag did not look good up against Nico Hülkenberg. I mean, Hülkenberg got into Q3 8 times this season, whilst K-Mag has only made it into Q3 3 times. Now, I think that's very worrying, because the problem with this car, of course, has been the fact that even though it's had kind of okay qualifying pace, it has been terrible in the race all season long, bad on its tires, to the point where the drivers can't even, they're on like multi-stop strategies that are just killing them in the races. And the only reason, Nico scored the points that he did is because, Australia was a crazy race where he finished in P7, and then he also scored points in the sprint as well, which obviously is a much shorter race. But even despite that, the fact that K-Mag hasn't been, in terms of raw pace, on Hülkenberg's level is a little bit worrying for next season, because again, you've got to imagine, if this continues, the team's probably going to look at K-Mag next season and say, we've already got Nico who's doing a good job, and we might be looking for someone younger and maybe quicker as well. So again, he's kind of built this bank of credit with Haas off the back of last year, to earn that contract extension for next season, but he also needs to get a lot closer to Nico Hülkenberg. Now, again, the team also needs to make the car a lot better, perhaps get it a little bit more towards K-Mag, because he is a quality driver, there's no doubt about it. But it's been a worrying season for K-Mag, I think. Especially when you consider that he was the established driver, especially when you consider his experience in Formula 1 as well. He can't afford another season like this in 2024, but at the same time, it's very difficult. How much of it is the driver? How much of it is the team and the car? I guess we'll find out next season in terms of, can he catch up to Hülkenberg and kind of save his Formula 1 career? And next up in third place, I have got Lance Stroll. Now, the reason why Lance undoubtedly has to be on this list is because, unlike some of the other drivers on this list, he had a very, very good car. And I think the thing about Lance's season is that it was, number one, it was massively inconsistent. I mean, yes, he had a good kind of end to the season. Yes, he had a good kind of beginning to the season, especially when you consider that, obviously, he had that kind of injury. He broke his wrists pre-season. So, yes, he had a strong kind of start and end, but that you just can't build a championship fight or even a decent kind of upper midfielder, season-long battle over inconsistent results like that. And when you consider Aston Martin, the car that they had, they were battling with the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren, and with someone like Lance Stroll, the best thing I could say is that he is holding the team back, and they're never going to be championship contenders, because even if he gets a better car, even if you put him in the RB19, those inconsistencies are still going to be there. And the problem is that up against, Sebastian Vettel over the past kind of couple of years, Lance has been okay, still inconsistent, but, respectable alongside Seb. Fernando Alonso is a different animal. He's a different level of driver at this stage of his career, and boy did Lance Stroll get found out and exposed in terms of he's not even just like a level below Fernando, or he's not just a level below the likes of Fernando, Leclerc, and Norris. He is like a good 2 or 3 levels below those drivers. And when you're Aston Martin and you want to be fighting in the future for podiums, wins, and championships, Lance Stroll has proved time and time again that, yes, he can have a few highlights. Yes, he can have a strong end to the season, a good, 3 or 4 races over the course of 22 races. That is just not going to cut it when you're trying to fight, again, the likes of Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, and Charles Leclerc in their respective teams. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you just have to look at what he did versus Fernando, the lack of contribution that he made towards Aston Martin's season. I mean, only scoring 26.4% of the team's, total points. Keep in mind, by the way, Fernando Alonso, that means that he is one of only 3 drivers, along with Max and Albon, that has actually single-handedly got his team to that Constructors' position. So, in the end, Lance Stroll didn't make any difference in the Constructors' Championship. In fact, he actually hampered them, and arguably they could have finished ahead of McLaren. And then obviously when you look at the race head-to-head and quali head-to-head and the average qualifying gap over 3/10 over the course of the season, for a driver that is that experienced, that is just not good enough. So again, it's a weird position that he's in, isn't he? Because of course he's the boss's son, and having a strong end to the season, I think Lawrence Stroll almost feels like, yes, now he's justified his position at the team. But like I said, 4 or 5 good races over the course of 22 is not what you need from a driver in a top team that Aston Martin wants to be. And next up in second place, I have got Logan Sargeant, of course, coming off the back of his rookie season in 2023. And as I'm recording, of course, he has not yet been confirmed for 2024, although knowing my luck, by the time I actually upload this, he probably has. So I do think he's going to get that contract extension for next season. I think he's done just enough to kind of secure it. And I think the fact that there isn't that many better alternatives, just waiting for that, just waiting to get into that seat, I think that also kind of helps him as well. I will admit, even though I'd probably re-sign him as well as I think Williams will, when you look at the likes of Liam Lawson on the sidelines, I think that's the really tricky one, because when you look at what Liam Lawson was able to do, kind of jumping in and straight away performing at a very, very decent level for a rookie, I think it makes the perception of Logan's season, kind of rookie season, even worse, and kind of we judge it even more harshly because of what another rookie then went on to do. So yeah, I do think the back end of the season has saved him, because we have seen him kind of string together weekends a lot more compared to the beginning of the season. Obviously, he scored that 1 point in Austin, which I think was really important, even though it didn't actually mean anything for Williams in the end, because Alex kind of by himself managed to secure 7th in the Constructors. But I think just emotionally getting that monkey off his back of finally getting his first points finish, and then some really strong pace in Las Vegas, for example. But then again, we get to Abu Dhabi and he gets both of his lap times deleted. So I think the raw materials and the raw pace is there from Logan Sargeant, but he has just struggled to string together weekends. And again, when you're up against Alex Albon, who thoroughly dominated him this season, I mean, a gap of over half a second on average in qualifying, that even for a rookie, that is not good enough. That was I think qualifying especially, he made loads of mistakes, had quite a few crashes, and I think that's been his biggest issue. So I think James Vowles has enough invested into him as a Williams young driver for the future that he will give him a contract for 2024, but no doubt for next season, he needs to show a big jump up, because Formula 1 is competitive. If Williams want to make that jump up to battle the likes of Alpine and maybe Aston Martin as well, they need 2 quality drivers, and at the moment, unfortunately, unless Logan takes a big jump up, I'm not sure he's going to be there for 2025. Last up and in first place, I've got a driver that some people might have even forgotten was on the grid in 2023, and that of course is Nick De Vries. Only 10 races he was given in the 2023 season, which it was harsh at the time, and it is still harsh now. On paper, actually, when you look at his stats, he wasn't as bad, relatively speaking, as, Sargeant was compared to Albon. The average qualifying gap between him and Yuki was just over 2/10. Yuki beat him 8-2 in the races and in qualifying as well. So again, technically that's, not as bad as Logan Sargeant, but you have to add the context that he chose to go to AlphaTauri over Williams after, his really good debut there last year. And I think that was his big mistake. He chose to go to the wrong environment because he saw a potential, gateway to going to Red Bull from AlphaTauri, but he kind of neglected the environment that he was stepping into. And that's the problem. He was stepping into that Helmut Marko, AlphaTauri, Red Bull environment. It came back to bite him, and only 10 races in, 11 races in Formula 1, only 10 in 2023. It's a pretty short career. Now, to defend Nick De Vries just a little bit, had he been given the entire season at AlphaTauri, I definitely think that he would have scored, at least 1 or 2 points, especially once the car got a little bit better in the second half of the season. But, he was dropped off the back of 10 races. Some drivers are given the entire season, like Logan Sargeant. Some are only given 10. And at the time, when you look at what Daniel Ricciardo and even Liam Lawson then went on to do, again, admittedly in a much better AlphaTauri, Red Bull didn't exactly make a mistake by dropping him. So luckily Nick de Vries has kind of landed on his feet after a difficult 2023. I know that he's going to be racing in Formula E and also hypercars as well, because he is a decent driver. That's the frustrating thing about Nick de Vries. There was not just the materials, but there was the resume of a really good driver, but he went into the wrong environment, and that was totally down to him. He chose to go there, and boy, did it bite him in the backside. Anyway, there you have it. That is my top 5 worst drivers of 2023. Don't forget to let me know your top 5 in the comments box below. And if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would be massively appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one.